Mike Leckrone. Thank you for being here. He will present on the history of the UW Band. The UW Marching Band. When Mike Leckrone became director of the Wisconsin Marching Band, the interest in the program was pretty low, and that would have been in 1969. Who knew that? Did you know? We got our fan club, they knew, 1969. Until, when did Mike Leckrone retire? Another pop question. 2019.
He hasn't retired yet.
You're still doing your thing, that's great. So, by creating a new demanding marching style, he emphasized showmanship and turned the program around. Mike will share an overview of that history, share his stories of the greatest band in the land. Please give a warm welcome to Mike Leckrone.
Thank you so much. I'm going to sit for a lot of the time. It's not that I'm getting old, but I am. I fractured my ankle not too long ago, so it's doing fine. But I just want you to know that it's not because I'm getting lazy, although that's true as well. That's a nice introduction. Last time I got introduced, they were saying, well, if you don't know Mike Leckrone, hearing him speak is a lot like going on your first blind date. It ain't everything you'd hope for, but it's better than nothing. I did a service club a few weeks ago, and when I was over, the young man came up and said, Mike, I'd like for you to have this little honorarium for speaking to us. And I said, you know, I'd really rather not take it. I said, you're a service club here in Madison. You do a lot of wonderful things. You do a lot of wonderful events, sponsor a lot of things. I said, why don't you take the money and turn it back into the club? I said, don't you have some kind of club that you're trying, or some kind of fund that you're trying to build up for the club? And he said, yes, we do. We have our fund to get better speakers. In an event like this, people invariably ask me, what was your greatest moment with the Wisconsin Band? I was with the Wisconsin Band 50 years. What was your greatest moment? That's easy. It was our Rose Bowl in 1994, 95. That was the high point of my career. Not to say there haven't been a lot of things other, but the expectations were so high for that event, and they were all met. And that's what made it so unusual. And so it was probably the event that stands out for me the most. I remember from that event came a sort of a saying that I've been using ever since. And I talked to the band that night before we went on to the Rose Bowl. I said, tomorrow's going to be a really important time in your life. It's going to be something you should retain and remember forever. It's one of those moments where you just can't let it go by without sealing it in your mind for the rest of your life. Because there have been thousands, if not tens of thousands, of Wisconsin band kids who would love to be in your shoes, who would love to do the Rose Bowl, who would love to do the parade. I said, they're not going to get a chance to do it, but you are. So remember to retain it. Keep it in your mind. And those moments of happiness that you can retain from this event can carry you on to a lot of other events where there may not be so many moments of happiness. And I've used that phrase, moments of happiness, ever since. I used it in every talk I gave since that to the incoming band. And it's a very important part of what I think we all should be doing. I'm not going to tell a lot of Rose Bowl stories, but I will tell one. Well, I may do more than one. The night before the Rose Bowl, they have a meeting in a room about twice this size. At the meeting, they give instructions for what it's going to be like the next day. Now, the Rose Parade is about 6 miles long. It takes over 2.5 hours to do it, from the time you start to the time you get off. And so it's a very arduous thing, and they want to make sure everybody's prepared. And they sit everybody in the room and say, okay, we want you band directors to know that tomorrow, you will not have to play in the entire parade, but what we want you to do is play for the first 30 minutes after the parade starts. We want you to stand, or want you to play for 30 minutes as the parade goes by, because that's where the TV cameras are. And we want you to be able to be on TV. So we want you to be playing constantly for the first 30 minutes. And then he said that after that time, you can play whatever you want to for the rest of the parade, because there's going to be another 2 hours. And then he looked at me and he said, Wisconsin, what I'd suggest you do is play whenever you see some patches of your fans along the parade route. We played on Wisconsin 127 times that day. But that's a moment I truly do remember. I get compared a lot in my job to a coach. Now, I don't mind that. There may be some coaches that do, but I don't. Because I understand what coaches have to do to get a finished product. I understand what they have to maintain in their own minds to it. And it's a tough job, and I'm pleased to be compared to them. Now, my colleagues at the School of Music, they don't give me much credit. They say, Mike, they said, you don't have to understand what coaches go through. You don't understand the pain and the anxiety that coaches experience. And my response to that is, you don't know what pain and anxiety is until you've marched in the homecoming parade right behind the Zora Camel Patrol. My colleagues give me they say, Mike, you don't teach anything important. You just teach a bunch of Wisconsin farm kids how to play a beer commercial. And when they start teasing me like that, I have a response that always kind of shuts them up. I say, how would you like to take a group of students you started to teach a subject to on Tuesday out in front of 80,000 people on Saturday and show what you taught this week? That's what I get to do. That's been what I've been doing, what I did for 50 years, and I enjoyed every moment of it because it's not only a challenge, but great rewards coming from the students. Band directors and coaches, they have a lot of the same sort of motto. We talk a lot about teamwork, coaches and band directors, teamwork. It just so happens that my definition of teamwork is exactly the same as what I learned Coach Alvarez motto or theory of teamwork was. When you think of teamwork, teamwork. A whole bunch of people doing what I say. You gotta think about that for a minute. We also talk a lot about leadership. And leadership is a term that I use a lot. I have two definitions of leadership. One, leadership is the ability and the willingness to inflict pain. And my students would tell you that there were many times that I was very good at that. But that definition doesn't talk about just inflicting pain on somebody else. It can be inflicting internal pain. And so you have to think about that. But my favorite definition of teamwork is the ability to negate the appearance of unexpected difficulties and unpleasant situations. To negate unpleasant situations, unexpected problems. And I'm going to tell you another Rose Bowl story about when I was at my very best being a leadership under those circumstances. It was one of the Rose Bowls that after we had done that first one, and the kids were excited. You don't understand, maybe how important that appearance is. They know they're in front of millions of people on television, and they do broadcast the Rose Bowl show, unlike some of the others. You realize just how important it is to them, and the kids look forward to it. And they understand what I told them in moments of happiness. It's going to be a chance of a lifetime. And so they were really fired up for the performance. We went out to our practice field the day before the Rose Bowl. It was under 2 inches of water. They had forgotten to turn off the sprinkler system on our practice field. I always thought it was the Stanford band that did it. But I could see the spirit of the band was sinking. I could see they looked around and said, we're not going to be able to rehearse. We're not going to be able to do what we want to do. It's going to be a disaster. And I could see that attitude, that spirit sinking. And I thought, I better start thinking of something that changes their attitude. I looked down the street. We were at Santa Monica High School. I looked down the street, and there was a soccer field. No lines. What do you think lines are on a football field for? Yeah, the band. Football team doesn't pay attention to the lines. They're there for the band. And I don't know if you know it, but almost all bands march what they call an 8-to-5 system. You take 8 steps and you hit a yard line. So when you watch a band next time, when you see them on the field, notice that the first person that takes a step will go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, hit the yard line. And then they do another 8 steps and they hit the yard. That's how we stay in line. That's how bands stay in line. That's how they're able to guide. So 8-to-5 is what we call that system, and bands all over the country do it. But we didn't have any yard lines. So I had a brilliant idea. I told my band staff, I said, get some horn cases. Get some horn cases, and every 5 yards, we have measuring ropes and so forth. Every 5 yards, put a horn case. So that visually, every 5 yards, you can see where that yard line is. And I put the horn cases up and I called them together and said, look, kids, we've got a great opportunity tomorrow. We got an opportunity to go on this practice field without the benefit of the yard lines and use our minds, use our alertness better than we ever have before. We'll have to guide. We'll have to relate to each other. We'll have to think about interval. We'll have to think about a lot of those things and really concentrate on it so that when we get on that Rose Bowl field tomorrow, it's going to be a piece of cake. There'll be nothing to it after we get that. We'll be able to do an almost perfect show without the benefit of the yard lines. And those kids bought that crap. Because in reality, we didn't need the rehearsal. We had rehearsed prior to the show. We were prepared. They wanted to put the top on it. But what happened is we took some of the pressure off, and they started having fun at the rehearsal, which is what I wanted them to do anyhow. They started having fun, and we had a really terrific rehearsal, and the next day the performance was great. So that was my greatest moments of being a leader. When I came to Wisconsin in 1969, the band, now, if you're a former member of the band, particularly during that early period around 1969, you don't like what I'm going to say next, but it's true. We weren't very good. We weren't very good. The band that I had at Butler University before I came to Wisconsin was better. But I sensed, even in those days, there was a spirit. There was a spirit that hadn't been unleashed yet. There was a spirit that was still waiting to draw things out that they had not done before. And so I took the job and thinking it was going to be a great opportunity. Now, a lot of people told me it wasn't a great opportunity for a lot of reasons. First of all, In 1969, if you remember your history, that was a tough time. That was a tough time historically. It was a tough time societally. People were having great difficulties in thinking socially how they were supposed to act. There was great dissent on campus all that time. It was a tough time to organize events. Guys told me it's not a good idea at Wisconsin in 1969 to put on a uniform and march. They didn't think it was a good idea. The other reason was that I was going to be the third band director. I was going to be the third band director in 3 years. The man who preceded me, a guy named Ray DeVore, a legend, absolutely a legend in terms of the history of bands, period. Not just marching bands, but bands. He was a great friend to me and a great mentor to me. But he had been there 34 years. I remember thinking, how could anybody do the same job for 34 years? But there was no continuity. Ray had left or had been interim band director, and then I came in. So there wasn't that sense of, we know what the next guy's going to do. There wasn't that sense of maintaining traditions and ideas. So that was a detriment. But the biggest problem was, in 1969, Wisconsin hadn't won a football game in 2 years. They hadn't won a football game in 2 years. Now, they tied one.
Yes.
I think that was against Indiana, and I don't count that. But they hadn't won, and so everything was done. At that point, a guy came in that I have, again, great admiration for. His name was Elroy Hirsch. And he got the whole idea of Wisconsin being a sleeping giant started. He came in, and I don't know if you remember in those days, but all over Madison, get the red out. There's big signs, get the red out. Start supporting the Badgers. And people slowly did. And I remember Elroy bringing me into his office, and he said, Mike, he said, we're going to break the streak. We're going to break the streak. I don't know when, but he said, we're going to break it. He said, and to avoid any problem with the authorities, I want you to get a parade permit. I want you to get a parade permit so that when we break that streak, the band can march all over Madison and not be interrupted by the police or any authorities that say you shouldn't be doing it. We'll have a parade permit. So I got a parade permit. In the first game we played Oklahoma, and I think we got beat by about 40 points. So we really didn't need a parade permit. But he said, get another one. So the next week we played UCLA. Only got beat by 2-3 touchdowns. But no parade. Next game, Penn State. I thought that would be a piece of cake. Penn State, these Eastern schools can't play tough football. I think it was 42-7 in their favor. So the next week I didn't bother to get a parade permit. I thought the interest has waned. There isn't much enthusiasm. There's not going to be that intensity that I'd sensed before. So I didn't get a parade permit. We beat Iowa to end the streak. And Camp Randall went crazy. If you happened to be there that time, you won't forget it. I mean, they rushed the field. They tore down the goalposts. They did everything you could imagine, and it was chaos. And I remember very clearly, and if you were there, you know it happened. The students, after we had beaten Iowa, and now we were undefeated in the Big Ten. But the students up in the stands started cheering, Rose Bowl, Rose Bowl, Rose Bowl. Some of you were there, I can tell.
Yeah.
And I got to thinking, I said, that may not be so far-fetched. Maybe sometime that's going to happen. And sure enough, 25 years later, it did. But it took 25 years. One of the things I tried to do with the band when I first came here is I wanted them to take pride in what they were doing. And you only take pride in something when you do something really well. And so I wanted to come up with one thing that I thought this first year, I'm going to get the band to do that so they can take great pride in what they're doing. And I looked at a lot of things and I came up, and this is absolutely what went through my mind. I came up with an idea. Let's do the best horns up anybody's ever seen. Now, what is horns up? Well, horns up is simply that manner which you at a rest position, and then you bring the horns up to play. Simple. Most bands, almost all bands, at that time did a single count horns up. It was 1, 2, 3, 4, up. That's how they did horns up. 1, 2, 3, 4, up. Now that can get sloppy because if somebody's a little bit late, if somebody doesn't have quite the snap, it's not going to look as good. So all I did, and I like to think I innovated it. I probably didn't, but if you liked it, I did innovate it. But all I did was add a 2-count system. So that the first thing we're going to do, band, is we're going to bring the horns straight out on 1, and then bring the horns up on 2. So you get a 2-count system. 1, 1, 2. And you can do that with a great deal of snap, with a great deal of precision. 1, 2. You didn't do that 1 count, sort of slide up. It was 1, 2. And I added one other little thing. I added a rim shot. 2 rim shots when the horns went out. They went click, 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 so that your mind heard something with more intensity than you were really seeing. And we worked on that. We worked on that almost as much as we did on the marching. And I wanted the kids to take great pride in it. And sure enough, before the season was over, the band kids were saying, well, Michigan band may play better than we do. Ohio State band may march better than we do, but we got the best damn horns up in the country. And I played on that for the rest of my time in Wisconsin. Take whatever you're doing and do it better than anybody else. The whole idea of our marching style came from much the same reason. I wanted to have snap rather than smooth. We developed a marching style that I started calling Stop at the Top. Now, Stop at the Top, if you saw the band march in those days, or other bands march, when they marched, they did a nice, smooth rotation. It was very smooth. What I did was say, to get a little more precision, to get a little greater sense of intensity, I want there to be 2 motions, so that there's a slight hesitation after you bring the foot up before you put the foot down. So you get that instead of up. And that stop at the top became something that I started to stress. And sure enough, when you saw the band in those days, it had a much more intense look. It had a much more physical look, which is what I wanted. I'd like to think before we were done, we were the most physical band in the country. I mean, I'd like to think that, and the kids really worked hard to try to make that happen. I did a lot of other little things. I made sure that the toe was always pointed down. I made sure that when they brought the foot down, that it came all the way down, and they didn't have the back foot, the rear foot, would always have a straight line down. And another thing that I mentioned that they didn't think about was we didn't run. The band in those days, and they still do, I called it that way. They call it the run-on. It's not running. Because in running, when you're running, your feet are off the ground. We always had a foot in contact with the ground. When we did the run-on, there was always a foot that was placed on the ground, and that's the hard part. That's what makes it physical, because anybody can run and keep the feet in the air, but when you have to put the foot down, it's makes it much more difficult. So that was the thing I introduced, and the band took great pride in that. My first year was very difficult to get people, obviously. The first band I marched in Camp Randall had 96 people, and we were scraping to get 96. We had a hard time. I was calling students that I knew had been in the band and try to get them to come into the band. I had other students call people that they knew that had been in their high school band and they thought they should come and play. We did everything we could to get people, just warm bodies. I remember somebody asked, well, how good do you have to be to play in the Wisconsin band? And the guy said, if you know which end to blow in, you're in. But we worked very hard. The biggest problem I had overcoming was a complacency, because I wanted that sense of hard work. I wanted that sense that they put a lot of effort into anything that they did. And I probably stressed that in the beginning as much as I did anything. One of the things that happened is people started noticing it because of the hard work and because of some of the things that we did. And one of the very first things that I did that first year was organize what a lot of people like to call a pep band. I didn't like that term. I don't like the term pep band. So I thought, if it's going to be the band that plays for varsity events, we're going to call it the varsity band. And it's been called that ever since. The varsity band was formed because the athletic department wanted somebody to play at basketball games. Just basketball games. In those days, there weren't really many women's basketball. What was going on? So we started playing men's basketball games, and the basketball boosters gave us some red and white candy jackets, colored jackets like those basketballs got on. Yeah. And we wore them, and people we went out on the floor and did actually standing on the floor shows, and got people to notice that the band was there. I'll make a long story short. It wasn't long until a lot of people started noticing what we were doing and wanted the band to perform. When women's basketball came in, we started playing women's basketball. Before it was over, the Wisconsin band, with me being there, played at every sporting event you could imagine that there was in Wisconsin except one. There's only one sporting event we did not play at. We played at track meets. We played at soccer games. We eventually played at hockey games because Bob Johnson insisted, and you didn't say no to Bob Johnson. Bob Johnson insisted that we start playing at hockey games. It became a tradition. We played on a barge in the middle of Lake Winona. We played in a barge thanks to Randy Jabline. And we played at a swimming meet. Jack Bettinger, the guy who was the swimming coach at that time, said, Mike, you got to play at a swim meet. You got to come play at a swim meet. And Jack pestered me so much one day, since in those days we rehearsed right across the street from the natatorium. I said, okay, let's take the band over and we'll do a swim meet. We got up in the balcony, if you remember what the natatorium was like in those days. We got up in the balcony and got ready to play and were set. And Jack was down on the floor with his swimmers, and we started playing the first two notes, and Jack stood. And I don't know if you could imagine what it sounded like. It was like Mammoth Cave. There's nothing but ringing around. And so that ended our opportunities to play. But the only event we never played was fencing. I never figured out how to play at fencing. But otherwise, we played at almost anything you could imagine. We played at golf matches. We played first tee, playing before the they started. And that became a really important part of what the Wisconsin band did. These events, and hockey became one of our great moments, because in those days the hockey team became great. They won the national championship. When I was there, they won the national championship 6 times, and each one of them was an exciting event. And I was in Boston Gardens. I was in Michigan a couple of times. I was in Duluth. One I remember, Grand Forks, North Dakota. Have you ever been in Grand Forks, North Dakota? There's an old vaudeville saying, I spent a week there one night. Not much good, but I'm a history buff. I really love history. And so anywhere I go in a city, one of the things I try to do is search out what the points of interest are, what the historical points of interest are. And I found out, doing some research, that Grand Forks, North Dakota was the last outpost General George Armstrong Custer visited before he went to fight the Battle of the Little Bighorn. Did you know that? Last place, the last outpost Custer visited was Grand Forks, North Dakota. And then he went on to fight Crazy Horse. Custer was so impressed with Grand Forks, he told the Chamber of Commerce, don't change anything till I get back, and they haven't. I've been with the hockey team, or the basketball team, all 3 times they were at the Final Four. What a great thrill that was. And I don't know how many basketball tournaments I've been to. I've just lost track, but which is a good thing, because that means they're going to keep going. I had, how am I doing on time? I don't want to. 20 minutes? Okay, I'm going to ask for some questions in a minute. But I had a lot of opportunities to change things. And one of the first things that I did after I'd been around for a while was I added the concert. I had a concert. First of all, it was at the Mills Hall in the Humanities Building, and then we moved to the Field House, and then we moved to the Kohl Center. First night, we played for about 340 people. Next night, we had a sold-out house of the next year, we had a 700 sell out. The next year, when we moved to the Field House, we had 2,000 people. And then it just kept growing until when I ended, we were doing 3 nights, selling out 7,000 seats each night, which was a great thrill, not just for me, because I did get a thrill out of it, but for the band. They felt like they were being recognized and rewarded, and that was very important to them. I'm going to take, you have any questions? I love to answer questions. If you've got anything that you might want to ask me. I mean, I jump around here a lot doing it. Anything you want? Yes, sir, over there.
Yes, Dr. Jordan's Conservatory of Music, now Butler. Did you get to meet the 4 freshmen?
I did.
Or Hoagie Carmichael?
I did.
Wow.
Yeah, Hoagie Carmichael. I tell you, I was directing the band at Butler when they did the 500 parade, 500-mile parade, and Hoagie Carmichael was a marshal, and we were in the same room getting ready to do the thing, and he probably said 3 or 4 words to me. How are you, kid? Nice to see you. And that was it. But I met him. And he's this guy that wrote Stardust, the guy that wrote all sorts of great tunes from that era. And he asked the 4 freshmen, at Butler University there was a snack bar. And the 4 freshmen would come in, when they were on the road, they would come in and just hang out. So I got a chance to meet with all those. It was a great experience. You got me started on another one of the greatest experiences I ever had was I got to spend when I was a sophomore in high school, I got to spend an evening on stage, well, not on stage, backstage, about from me, as far away from me to that chair, from Louis Armstrong, for an evening. I was there for 3 hours, watching Louis Armstrong. Now, that was one of the great moments of my life, but I didn't realize it until later. I was thrilled to have the opportunity to do that. My trumpet teacher at the time had arranged for me to be there because he knew a guy who was in Louis Armstrong's band, and he got me in to see the show. But the thing I remember, here's Louis Armstrong, one of the greatest jazz musicians. Well, let me strike that. One of the great musicians of our time. Here's Louis Armstrong playing in this little podunk city of Rochester, Indiana, for a crowd of people who probably didn't know entirely how important he was to the history of music. Playing the same tunes he probably played hundreds and hundreds of times. And you could just feel the excitement that he was playing with. That's a message I never lost, that no matter what the crowd was, he gave everything he had to that performance, and he didn't have to. He could have phoned it in. He could have just said, oh, let's go through it again, guys. But he didn't do that. He made it a very important, you felt that he thought it was important. And that's a lesson I tried to pass on to my kids, the kids in the band, that every group is important, no matter how big, how small, what the situation is. And it was a great moment for me. I got sidetracked a little bit there, but you started me with Odie Carmichael, so anything else you'd like to know? There's a question.
What was your prompt for the 1-2? What did you do before they did the 1-2?
Well, the band went 1, 2, 3. It always got 1, 2, 3, out, up. You just verbally counted off 1, 2, 3, out, up. And they always came in, and it got to be fun. I mean, they took a great pride. And we got very particular. The horn had to be exactly horizontal. When you brought it up, it had to be vertical. You couldn't just sort of slop it up. It had to be absolutely precise. And from that point on, every year I had the band, I had with the band a thing I called the point of emphasis. We're gonna spend time working on the other things, but this is one thing we're gonna get better than we've ever had it before. So each year with the band, there was a point of emphasis that I had to make them try to get better in that one thing, which then feeds into the other things. It becomes infectious. There's a question there, then Paul.
What instrument or instruments did you play in your life, and what?
I'm sorry.
What instruments did you play or in your life, if you played, and then what led you to become a leader of a marching band?
Did you say what instrument did I play, or what instrument did I play well? Well, actually, I started as a trumpet player. And all modesty prevents me from saying I was pretty good. But I was pretty good. I was a trumpet player. But, you know, if you're a band director and you go through the music education courses, you have to learn to play all the instruments. You have to have somebody. I could fool everybody in this room for thinking I could play all the instruments. Okay, I could fool you for a while. But then it'd reach a point where you'd see, oh, well, there's limitations. But I learned the basics for everything, how to produce a good tone, how to finger the various instruments. So I could probably still play most any of them you asked. The instrument that gave me the most problems was flute. I had more problems with flute, and you'd think that would be one of the easier ones, but I had more trouble with that than probably any other instrument that I have. You ask how I got started? My dad was a high school band director. So I didn't know any other life. I didn't know anything except what he did as a high school band. And that's what I wanted to be. That was my goal, is to follow in his footsteps. And then somewhere along the line, I got sidetracked into the college business, which he never understood, because he couldn't understand why I only had 3 classes a day, and he was going to school from 8 in the morning till 3 or 4 in the afternoon. But I have a great I have great feelings for what he made me love music, and I think that's the most important thing you can do. I saw an old pipes, yeah.
This isn't necessarily a question, but it's an important story in my life. And the band's first road trip west.
Oh, to Seattle?
Yeah. And out of that came, for many of us, that we really internalized the best band in the land, because that was a memorable event.
Well, what she's talking about, it was in 1993.
Yeah.
We went to Seattle due to people like Paul and other people who said, the band hasn't taken any trips, there have been no bowl games, we haven't had any place to go, let's take them someplace where they're memorable. And I said, well, we're playing a game in Washington. And I remember, I think it was Jerry Fluid, or was it you that said, why Washington? He said, that's not a big trip. No, I said, I'm not talking about Washington, D.C. I'm talking about Washington on the Pacific Ocean. And they arranged to make it happen. It was through alumni, so we put together a trip where we took the band, and one of the experiences I came back with, we had a band do a halftime show on the deck of the USS Nimitz, one of our nation's biggest aircraft carriers, and there's plenty of room. I mean, people said, "Is there going to be enough room?" Well, we could put our football field on the deck of the Nimitz and still have space on every side. So it was a great experience, and it, again, just by chance, the next year we went to the Rose Bowl, and we had no thought of it at the time. We just wanted to get a trip. We wanted to go someplace besides Iowa City.
We have a question over here.
Hey, Mike. Bill Richardson, who was the trombone professor at the School of Music.
No, I don't want to hear about Bill.
I know. No, but he paid you a compliment and said that you could play trumpet in any style that you wanted to, whether it was Bix or Louis Armstrong. Is that something you set out to do and worked at and practiced, or did you just have a good ear and just picked it up and did it?
Did you like what I did? Thanks, Bonnie. No, I listened. My dad had a great record collection, and I listened to all those people that you mentioned, and I was conscious. I tried to, because I didn't have a unique talent, I tried to, if I heard Bix play, I wanted to see what he did, some of the mannerisms he had. Lewis, I mean, you can't play like Lewis, but you can sort of imitate him. Buddy Berrigan was a great Wisconsin trumpet player that I thought was maybe one of the best that ever happened. I tried to play like him, but it was conscious on my part, listening. But I did it mostly through my dad's record collection. I just listened a lot and then tried to see how close I could come. But thank you for mentioning it. And tell Bill I said hello. Yes, sir. There's this gentleman right there. Oh.
Hi, Mike. I have a question, but first a thank you. I want to thank you for being such a good friend to my brother John and
John who?
John Bass.
Oh, Sure.
But my question is, and thank you for all of those amazing band concerts. Do you miss flying around the Kohl Center?
Absolutely. It's the one thing I miss. I love the flying part, and once they showed me that we could do it, I wouldn't let them take it out of the show. I said, I was having too much fun. It's the closest I'll ever go to weightlessness. It's really, it feels a lot like weightlessness because of where they put the spots on your hips. When you lift you up, you have no sense of, it's interesting because to turn when you're in the air, you have to learn how to do it by shifting your weight, because if you try to swim, there's no resistance there, there's nothing to swim against. So no, but I enjoyed every bit of it, and I thank you for putting up with my interest in doing it. It was great fun. I did a lot of strange things. I would tell you this, I mentioned this before. There was one stunt that I did that I would never do again. I never did again. And I'll tell you about it because it was stupid on my part. We were at the old field house. And I don't know if you remember how the field house was built for sure, but there are 3 levels. There's the top level, then there's that middle level, and the floor level. Well, my stage hands had the great idea, Mike, we can rig a fire pole, a fireman's pole, so you can slide from the top of the field house, where that top balcony is, down to the floor, make an entrance, we'll have spotlights on you all the way down, and you can slide down and make a great entrance. They forgot to mention a couple of things. One was there was no way to safety it. There's no way to safety it. You're sliding down a pole unless you have like lumberjack would use, which you wouldn't be able to slide like we would slide. There was no way to safety what we were doing. The second problem they didn't mention is because of where they had to place the pole from the balcony, you couldn't just reach out and get it. You had to jump out, grab it, and slide all the way down. I did it. I would never do it again. I would never do it again because I'm stupid. But that was the fun of doing the concert. Was I had these people who were very inventive. They'd been around show business, had been around all kinds of entertainment things, and they gave me a chance. Can you try this? Here's something you can try to do. We did everything you could imagine, I think, to get me on stage. I remember coming into the Kohl Center in the middle of a what would we call it? Ice maker. Zamboni, yeah. I was in the middle of the Zamboni, and then they lifted up the bed and slid me out onto the ground. So we did a lot of strange things. What else would you like to know? I enjoy answering those questions.
Question?
Did you ever have to negotiate with Budweiser for the Budweiser beat?
You know, all of that came by accident. No, the answer to your question is no, because when you say, did I have to do any kind of negotiating, anything we got from Budweiser in those days, they gave us. They gave it out of, well, we were doing a great thing for their product. Let's face it, we were making them very well known, and there was never any newspapers picked it up. There was never any talk of anything that there were a lot of people who thought Budweiser should be paying us money. And I will be very honest with you, occasionally a check would come in to the band fund. And I mean, it would be worth noting, certainly, but it wasn't like, 6 figures or anything like that. But they did recognize it, and included the band in a lot of their sort of extra things. If they would have a gathering or a banquet or something, Budweiser often picked up the bill for it. But there was never any negotiation. If there was, they left me out, which I can understand. Anything else? Yes, sir, again.
What about the elephant?
Well, I'm glad you brought that up. One of my most interesting moments. People say it should have been your most embarrassing moment. It wasn't. But in 1988, we were having another tough time with football. I think that year we won one game before it was over. And I went to several meetings at the athletic department where we were trying to find ways to get people to come to Camp Randall, to get involved in Camp Randall. And on one of the meetings, it came around to me and said, "You got any ideas or something?" And I said, "Well, we could stage a circus. We could stage a circus in Camp Randall and have the halftime show be what a circus would be." And so they said, "Well, Mike, if you want to try to do that, go do it." So I had some ideas. So first thing I did, I called the Zor clown people, and they said, "Sure, we'll bring clowns for you. We'll bring whatever you need." They brought some of their little cars and said, "We'll run those around." I called people who I knew were acrobats, tumblers. "Yeah, we'll be part of the acrobatic scene." I had the people from Baraboo bring me down what's it? No, well, Ringling Brothers, but what's the? No, I'm talking about the thing that you play instrument. No, that's not Calliope. It's Callio. It's Callio. No wonder I couldn't think of it. So we had a Callio playing in the end zone at different times during the sort of game. As far as I'm concerned, it was more pleasant than what they play now, but that's a different story too. We had they brought some circus wagons down. We parked them at the north end of the stadium, and we had a lot of things going. And I had people dressed in all sorts of costumes, pretending they were tight wire walkers and so forth. And then I started thinking, we've got everything in. The one thing we don't have is we don't have any live animals. You can't have a circus without having live animals. So I called the people up at Circus World and I said, "Do you happen to have an elephant that you could bring down and we could bring on the field?" And they said, "Yeah, we do. We have an elephant named Molly. Molly is one of those elephants that they ride. They let the kids ride." And they said, we could bring Molly to the stadium and you can exhibit her." So I thought, well, I just can't have an elephant on exhibit. If I'm going to have an elephant in Camp Randall, I got to ride it. I got to ride the elephant. So we worked out a plan. So I was going to, at one point in the show, I was going to go up in the tunnel, get on the top of Molly, back her, and she was going to go down the ramp, go through the goalpost to the 50-yard line where she would stop. I would dismount. End of the show, I go up, I conduct varsity. It went perfectly. I mean, when I showed up at the top of the ramp and the crowd could see it, it was a huge, huge reaction. I mean, I thought, well, this is really going well. This is really what I wanted to have happen. We got down to the 50-yard line. I got off the elephant, and there was another huge audience response. It wasn't for me. Molly had done what a lot of animals do when they get frightened a little bit. She did it right on the 50-yard line. And it was very apparent, not only orally, but, well, let's just say everybody knew what had happened, and they had to quickly get some scoop shovels. Now, notice I used the word plural. I used it plural. There were scoop shovels, they were scooping it up, but there was still the odor. So they brought out hoses. They stretched hoses the diagonal length of the field, splashing off so that it would smell better. Finally, after about half an hour, we were able to resume the game. Wisconsin got a 5-yard penalty for delay of game. I thought it should have been 15 yards for unsportsmanlike conduct. But I think the thing that I think was the most embarrassing, and this is true, I could show you the clippings, the day after the game, and Wisconsin lost the game again, there was a headline in one of the newspapers that said, Wisconsin team wasn't the only thing that smelled up Camp Randall yesterday. That was cruel. We're not done?
We have time for one more question.
One more question.
One more question.
I don't see, well, I'll take the time to, it's a story I love to tell because it involves my father. My father was a band director. And he instilled in me a love for music that he thought I should pass on to everybody who was around him. And I remember when I was a kid, beginner's band, he said to me and anybody who would listen, kids, I want you to learn about all kinds of music. Don't turn your back on any kind of music. It's all important, whether it be opera, whether it be jazz, whether it be country western, whether it be symphonic music. Don't disregard any of it. Study it, learn about it, learn what makes it good to some people, learn what you think could help make it great. Study every kind of music. Don't turn your back on anything. So kids learn about all kinds of music, but don't pay any attention to the music that they play at burlesque shows. Because the music there isn't very good. And you would probably see something that you should not see. My dad preached that litany every day of my high school career. He had something to say like that every day. Learn about all kinds of music. It's all important. Don't turn your back on anything. Don't pay attention to music they play in burlesque shows. Music there isn't very good. Probably see something you shouldn't see. Finally, I went away to college. And like any 18-year-old kid, I had to find out some things for myself, right? We all did that. You have to find out some things. So one night, I went to the Fox Theater in Indianapolis, Indiana, corner of 22nd and, I don't know why I remember that. And I went up in the balcony, the music started playing, and right away I knew my dad was right all of those years. Folks, the music wasn't very good. It just wasn't very good. And I did see something I shouldn't see. Dad was in the third row. That's all right. Thank you so much. You've been great.
Thank
for just a few moments because, as our guest of honor, we have a surprise for you. You shared a lot of stories and surprises, and we want to share with you. So, John Etter, a member here at the Verona Senior Center, partnered with the Overture Center on a My Melodies project and told his story through song and the musicians at the Overture Center. And we would like to play that song for you. Okay, so I'm going to tee this up here. One moment. And to give you a little background, John, would you like to introduce the name of the song?
The name of the song is Here Comes the Bucky Wagon, the original Bucky Wagon, which I own. And it's a 1931 fire truck. And in 1968, when I came from Wisconsin after spending my first year at Whitewater, I had a meal job at Ann Emery, which was a private girls' dormitory on campus. And the captain of the cheerleading squad happened to be the head waiter. And so one night, Thursday night, we were out consuming some beer, as we would know, and it was getting close to homecoming. And we started talking about homecoming parades. He said, that's really a hassle for us cheerleaders because we have to walk the whole damn thing. And I said, well, I got this old fire truck that I owned that had been used in Monroe at what you may remember, Badger Booster days with the Swiss Colony, that they had been using that for some time. This old fire, I bought it when I was 15 years old for $250. So I drove it up from Monroe, and this woman here happened to have been there, and this woman too were cheerleaders at the time, and they were in 1968. We came scooting down the chute to get onto the field in 1968, and then in 1969, and then in 1970. And then in 1970, Arlie Monks had some guests here, and they were from up in northern Wisconsin. And after we came shooting down the chute, everything they said, Arlie, how did the university buy a fire truck? And he said, oh no, there's a student from Monroe that brings it up every year for the thing. Well, they went back up north, and where they were from, and there was an old fire truck in the town they were at, and they bought that and then donated that to the university, and that became what I call the current Bucky Wagon. And so many of the last homecoming parades, and this year also, this fire truck will be in the homecoming parade again, along with these three women. We've had, and we generally go either just in front of or just behind the alumni band many times, which is easy to arrange. So anyway.
Do you want to be on the Bucky Wagon with
Bucky
us?
wagon this year?
How cold is it gonna be? Oh, sure, I'm sure I do that.
October 11th, it's fine.
We've got some recruitment team over here. So with no further ado, Mike, behind you there is a short video, and we will play the song. Oh, hold on. I'm gonna start it from the beginning here.
Bucky wagon wheels from just a little distance south. Right on which is just outside the road. Two boys worked out some money to fix the engine up, and for Bucky now it's silently below. Roll out the Bucky wagon, roll out the Bucky wagon, roll out the Bucky wagon, John. It's been rolling down the street since 1968. It goes round town engine number one. Here it comes rolling down the highway, Badger red and green and in the sun. It's ready for a show and a countdown from the road. Here comes round town engine number one. Roll out the bucky wagon, roll out the bucky wagon, roll out the bucky wagon, John. It's been rolling down the street since 1968. You're from Crowntown and you're #1. If there's one thing you know about Wisconsin, I'll show you that we're Badgers in the crowd. While we're cheering from the stands and we're striking up the band, blow that siren for the Badgers, blow it loud. Roll out the bucky wagon, roll out the bucky wagon, roll out the bucky wagon, John. It's been rolling down the street since 1968. Here comes Crowntown, engine #1. Every year it cruises up Lakeland. Now Wisconsin doesn't give enough to make. But what's that over there? See the people start to stare. See the bucky wagon driving on stage. Roll out the bucky wagon, roll out the bucky wagon, roll out the bucky wagon, John. It's been rolling down the street since 1968. Here comes Crowntown engine #1. Look up at the wagon and see it full of friends. Cheerleaders from now and long ago. We have shared our cheer spirit and parades throughout the years. Watch them jump out and go poke on the streets. Roll out the bucky wagon, roll out the bucky wagon, roll out the bucky wagon, John. It's been rolling down the street since 1968. Here comes Crowntown engine #1. The wagon's always turned right over the flag. The cheerleaders and the anthem band. Everyone is happy when the wagon comes to town, and their cheers will now be heard throughout the land. Roll out the bucky wagon, roll out the bucky wagon, roll out the bucky wagon, John. It's been rolling down the street since 1968. Here comes Crowntown engine #1. Once Pacific here, we were walking some cheer. No parade was scheduled in the books, but the bucky wagon came like every other year the same, cruising right out of streets to pick the bang. Roll out the bucky wagon, roll out the bucky wagon, roll out the bucky wagon, John. It's been rolling down the street since 1968. Here comes Crowntown engine #1. Through all the years of fun, that engine's been a star, bringing joy to everyone around. Birthday parties for the young, holidays and TV fun, the bucky wagon's been for it all. Roll out the bucky wagon, roll out the bucky wagon, roll out the bucky wagon, John. It's been rolling down the street since 1968. Here comes Crowntown engine #1. Every year we face up to new battles, bring Wisconsin forward on and on. Though the world it may change, the truth will stay the same. The bucky wagon will keep rolling on.
He took his engine and he paraded it all around downtown.
Since 1931, it has been second to none. We will celebrate the school that makes us proud. Keep the engine rolling on for our daughters and our sons, and we'll all be here together in the crowd, in the crowd. Roll out the bucky wagon, roll out the bucky wagon, roll out the bucky wagon, John. It's been rolling down the street since 1968. Roll out the bucky wagon, roll out the bucky wagon, roll out the bucky wagon, John. It's been rolling down the street since 1968.
Reporting from Badger Bash, I'm Erin Sullivan with FBC 15 News. Go Bucky.
Oh, they beat Iowa. Thanks for sharing your song, John. And another round of applause for Mike Leckrone. Thank you for being here.